Hey guys, what's up? It's your boy Evan X here, and in this video, we're going to be talking about stability. Stable tracking shots like this shot right now are my weaknesses. I love the way it makes your videos look so much more professional, and it doesn't even matter what you're shooting. As long as it's stable, it's almost always bound to look cinematic. So how do you get smooth, stable footage? How does one reach such degrees of stability? Filmmaking tools are getting better and more advanced every single day. And not only that, but they're also getting much cheaper, therefore making filmmaking much more accessible. There's never been a time in history when everything you needed to make a video could fit in the palm of your hands. If you went back in time and told 13-year-old me that you could get a 4K camera for less than $1,000, he would have said, fuck! Back then, 4K was like unheard of. Like the only camera that I knew that could shoot 4K was like the Red One. And that cost tens and thousands of dollars. Compare that to now, we get 4K on our phones. Other than higher image resolution, something that's been getting much more accessible lately are camera stabilizers. The tools you required in order to achieve stable footage used to be incredibly expensive, and not only that, just complicated. You needed a stabilizer, but you also needed a special operator who was trained to use the stabilizer, and it had like a whole body rig system with an arm. It's just ugh. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to get stable footage without having to necessarily break the bank. There are 4 methods in which you can get stable shots that I know of. The first way, you can use a software solution, something like Adobe's Warp Stabilizer, in order to turn your shaky mess into smooth movements. And what I've found is that Adobe's Warp Stabilizer is somewhat reliable, but mostly really easy to use. All you have to do is import your clip into Premiere Pro, add the Warp Stabilizer effect to the clip, let it do its thing, and once it's done, you can adjust some settings if you feel you need to, but you don't even have to most of the times, and well, I'll let the result speak for itself. But the problem with Warp Stabilizer is it works well with small movements, but it doesn't work well if your clip has any type of rolling shutter, motion blur, or just in general big sudden movement, because then Warp Stabilizer just turns your footage into jelly, which looks really ugly. If you find that Warp Stabilizer is turning your footage into jelly, then either there's just too much movement to stabilize, or you've got too much rolling shutter in your footage, which A6300 users like me know. There's a lot of that. And if you find that your footage at times just suddenly blurs directionally, that means there's too much motion blur in your footage, so you're going to need to use a higher shutter speed. But overall, Warp Stabilizer is a really great and easy to use plugin, although it's not perfect. It's not going to give you 100% great results with every clip you throw at it, but for clips with relatively manageable levels of shakiness, you can really pull off some crazy results. The second way that I know of in order to get more stable footage is to shoot in slow motion, because then your sudden shaky movements turns into smooth gliding movements when played back in slow motion. So instead of your videos looking like this, it's gonna look a lot smoother, although slower, like this. Of course, it's not always ideal to shoot in slow motion. Sometimes you don't want slow motion, like if you have a dialogue scene between two people, that'd be really weird in slow motion. But if you're going for a stylized music video kind of look, then this could be a really great way to get less shaky and more stable footage, providing of course your camera is capable of shooting in slow motion. But if your camera can't shoot in slow motion, or if you don't want to shoot in slow motion, but your camera is capable of shooting in 4K or higher, then you can use that extra resolution in editing to add in movements back into your footage. To do this, this, lock your camera down on a tripod and shoot as wide as you'd like. When editing, use a 1080p timeline so that you can use that 4K resolution to your advantage, so you can scale in and out to create a zoom in kind of look, or you can just pan and move the footage around to make it look like the camera was moving when really it wasn't. But remember, doing this technique doesn't have the same effect as if you were to move the camera in real life, because when you move the camera in real life, you're getting parallax between the foreground and the background, and that's what gives your movements depth that unfortunately can't be recreated just by scaling in and out on your editing software. But if that's the look you're going for, then this is a great alternative way to get smooth, stable footage without having to use expensive gimbals. Which leads me to my third method of stabilizing your footage, using an actual stabilizer. Something like this Zhiyun crane, or however you pronounce it. Now, there's a lot of different stabilizers available in the market right now, but from what I can tell, there's two main categories of stabilizers. Either it's a glide cam type stabilizer, which uses weights to balance your camera, or it's an electronic gimbal, which uses motors to keep your camera steady. The Zhiyun crane that I showed you is an electronic gimbal which uses 3 motors to stabilize the camera by isolating movements from the user. And the results? They're just ridiculous. You know what? I'll let you watch for yourself. Of course, if you don't have the stabilizer, that doesn't mean you can't get stable shots. You can still use the previous techniques that I showed you before to get really great stable shots if you understand its limitations and work around it. In fact, I myself used warp stabilizer for years before I had enough money to get that Zhiyun crane. So please don't feel like you have to buy a stabilizer to get smooth shots. Work with what you have and make the most out of that. Of course, having the right tools for the right job can be nice, but making the most out of your situation, making the most out of what little you have to create content that you're proud of is incredibly satisfying. And I think that's the fun of filmmaking. You start with something small and cheap, and then you eventually build your way up to something like a red weapon. But anyways, that's 4 methods that I know of that you guys can use in your videos to get better, more stable shots. If you guys have any questions, or better yet, if you guys know any other ways to get stable shots that I didn't mention in the video, leave them in the comment section below. Let's all learn together. Anyways, I'm Evan X. Go out and shoot. Sleep well.